All right, that's what you was planning on, probably. I'd like to call the September 9th meeting to order. Mr. Clayton, if you would lead us in prayer, and Mr. Jeffers, if you'd lead us in the pledge, please.
Let us bow our heads. Heavenly Father, please be with us as we go about this meeting. Please be with all of those that are here that have business before us. Please be with our young men and women in the military as they go about defending us so that we are allowed to have meetings such as this. In thy holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We've got a couple of adjustments here on the agenda. Item number 3 will be opened as a public hearing, and item number 4 will include application for adult care home advisory committee.
Move for approval.
Any further discussions? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we have an agenda. Anybody want to speak tonight?
No, sir.
Okay. Anybody got anything they want to talk about on the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Ms. Jensen, get it right now.
Good evening. In the spring of 2019, Person County applied to have a graduate student team analyze the possible revitalization of the historic Helena School in Timberlake as part of the team's coursework in a community revitalization class at UNC Chapel Hill. The team produced a comprehensive report at the conclusion of the project with 4 recommended actions the county can take for encouraging redevelopment of the school by a private developer. And here to present a summary of the findings are Maria DeWeese, Paul Liu, and Natalie Swanson, and they're going to lead us through a PowerPoint this evening highlighting the what they learned about the community and their recommendations.
Okay, y'all will come forward, please.
Can we just cue up the... Yes. There you go. All right. Thank you all for having us. My name is Maria, and my colleagues Natalie and Paul and I are really excited to speak to you about our work last semester. We took a course in the School of Government that taught community revitalization. And as you just heard, Person County applied to have us, a graduate student team, undertake an analysis of the potential redevelopment of the Helena School. And we considered various strategies that Person County could take to support development and encourage private investment. Cool. So we'll get started in Timberlake, a small community located in southern Person County, as you all know. The population is about 4,300 people with a median age of 43, and the annual median income is about $60,000 a year. Timberlake is the most densely populated area in southern Person County, but it is currently unincorporated. The site in question, there we go. So the site in question is the Helena School building. It's about 2,500 square feet, and it was built in 1936. And there's also 3 satellite buildings adjacent to the school that were built in later years but are located right next door. The school has been underutilized for a number of years, but the building has significance to many in Timberlake who may have attended school there. We've heard that a number of times. And then as we move along, there are some considerations we'd like you to keep in mind about the site. Traffic is an issue there. There's limited traffic capacity on Helena Mariah Road, and the parking capacity of the site is somewhat limited. The area also has some strict stormwater regulations to protect the Falls Lake watershed. And finally, we found the auxiliary buildings to be a unique challenge to the site, to the redevelopment, and we'll get into that a bit more as we go along. But this is a brief explanation of the conclusion of our report, which was that we suggested a multifamily housing development within the historic school with a commercial space located in the auditorium. That was based on our analysis, basically of the best and highest use of the site. And as we move forward, I would just like to keep in mind that the project will be quite financially challenging for a private investor or an outside developer, and it may require a community champion to take it on. And we're going to recommend a few strategies that Person County could use to get involved. This is an overview of our report that we hope you've received. There's basically a 4-step process that we took in our analysis. We started out with a community scan, and then we learned more about the parcel analysis in the area, the site-specific kind of land development trends there. Thirdly, we did a market analysis to see what the market could support at the site. And then finally, we did a financial feasibility analysis before we made our recommendations. So we'll get started with the community profile. Well, we performed the community scan to just kind of get a sense of the community's assets and what could catalyze development there. We looked at a number of different potential assets and liabilities in Timberlake that a developer would certainly want to consider if they were looking to invest in the site. Assets include definitely the location and proximity to Durham and Roxborough, as well as the amenities located right around the site. There's a park, very actively used recreational areas. Some liabilities might include the limited traffic on the road there, and just having limited services in a more rural community was something we considered. And our community scan also identified a number of different stakeholders who we think will be definitely important in the future of the school. These folks are going to have a vested interest in what happens here, and partly why we're highlighting them now is to kind of hammer home that point about a community-minded investor. This is really going to be a community effort, and these are some of the folks that could be involved in the redevelopment. So our second part of the report does a site analysis of the land in Timberlake. We looked at parcel level trends. We specifically looked at different land use, ownership, occupancy, and parcel values to just better understand what's going on in and around the school. We had first identified a study area that captures the land around the site. And it also contains the 2 main commercial corridors in Timberlake. There's kind of that main town center, and then we identified the gateway along 501 as just important to keep in mind when thinking about redevelopment. The study area included 101 parcels, 221 acres, and it totaled about $20 million in value. And the whole area is zoned for a mix of residential and commercial. One of the bigger points we took away, you can read more about our site analysis in the report, but the biggest point is that there's 5 primary landholders in this particular study area who own nearly half the parcels in the study area, which just basically means that they are going to be significant players in the future redevelopment and certainly key stakeholders. This map here shows where those landholders are, but also we overlaid kind of a utilization map as well, showing which parcels are more underdeveloped or underutilized. But just ultimately, these folks that we identified are going to be important in the future of the school. So now I'm going to hand it over to Paul Liu to talk about our market analysis.
Thanks, Martin. So after we did our parcel analysis, we researched the real estate market around Timberlake to gauge the supply and demand for different potential uses for the school. And the goal of doing this market analysis is to determine the highest and best use for the school. Is it better, for example, for the school to be used for residential multifamily? And if so, how many units can the school support? Or is there more of a need in the market for office or retail space in the area, which the school could be used for? And if so, how many square feet of retail or office space can the market hold, and how many parking spaces do we need? So these are some of the questions which our market analysis tries to answer. So this slide shows the findings from our market analysis. Looking at the market for office space, office jobs have been declining in Southern Person, and the demand for office space is going down. So therefore, adding new office space wouldn't really make much sense. Timberlake is a retail hub in Southern Person, but because the area around it is so rural, the analysis concludes that Timberlake can support between 1,600 and 2,800 square feet of retail space. While this is not much compared to our 25,000 square foot school, we think it would be a great use for the auditorium within the school. And then looking at the residential market, we found that Timberlake is expected to become older and wealthier in the next 5 years. And these trends imply that the community can support between 70 and 110 multifamily rental units. And because this seems like the most feasible use for our school, the next few slides will provide more detail on our residential market analysis. So this is an overview of demographics around Timberlake. So we first defined an area on which we performed our residential market analysis. And this corresponds to a 20-minute drive time from Timberlake. So this area includes Roxborough and Northern Durham County, and is the area from which we expect a large portion of our future tenants to come from. Our market area has around 44,000 people and 17,000 households, where the median age is 45, and the median household makes around $57,000 a year. And this is higher than both the county and the state. You can see also that home values are relatively high in our area, but median rent is quite low, which implies that a lot of the rental units might be affordable housing. So this slide shows that there are a lot of middle to higher income households in our market area compared to North Carolina currently. And our research also suggests that in the next 5 years, the number of higher income households is expected to increase in the area around Timberlake. The number of lower income households is expected to decrease. Then looking at the age distribution around Timberlake, we also find that there are more older residents compared to the state currently, and the elderly segment is expected to grow by around 1,600 people in the next 5 years. So to summarize our market analysis, our research showed that as wealthier households move in and the population ages, Timberlake can potentially support between 70 and 110 new units in the next 5 years. And also because there is essentially no multifamily housing in Southern Person County, there might already be some pent-up demand for this type of housing, which our school could be used for. And lastly, we think a residential development can take advantage of the park next door, as well as the gym and the general store down the street to catalyze additional development in the community. So now I'll hand it off to Natalie to talk about the financial feasibility aspects of such a project.
Thank you, Paul. Let us know, by the way, if we're in the way of your view to our slides.
We're good. We got
We're
full
good?
screen.
You got, okay. It seemed like it, but I just wanted to be sure. Oh, okay, we move forward a little bit. Oh. Well, that's where we want to be. Okay, so with an understanding of the use in mind, now that we have made it through our analysis of what we think this space can support, we move on to the financial feasibility component. Here, we're thinking about what a developer would expect to see in returns on this project and how the county can be involved possibly in improving the financial feasibility of this project. So we have a few options we'll talk about here. First of all, we have the program. This is a possible layout of the space. We have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments as well as a commercial use for the auditorium. A developer might have a different possible layout. It would depend on their preferences. The auditorium would have to be preserved as commercial space, or at least in its current layout, in order to get historic tax credits. This is crucial to the project, and I'll talk more about this in a moment. You'll see the rents are a little bit high compared to what you might expect in general. However, these are based on comparable properties that we analyzed and are used to kind of bolster the feasibility of this project. So as we move forward into the base case, which is where we're at without county intervention or ways that they can be involved, that you can be involved, these are some of our basic assumptions. First of all, we assume that the project receives historic tax credits. We assume that a developer would hold the project for 10 years, which is relatively long. Usually a project would see more like a 5-year hold period. We assume that the acquisition cost would be $14 per square foot. This is lower than the tax assessed value. However, the tax assessment was in 2013, so it's a little bit out of date. The property is probably depreciated, and this value is also based on comparable properties. And finally, we assume that this project can attract a community-minded investor in order to get off the ground. So here's our base case. The internal rate of return is a measure of profitability over time. In a rural county, or in a rural community, a developer would want to see a project with a return of more like 15%. So 6.4% is not attractive. The cash equity requirement at the top of permanent sources is also fairly high at 1.3 million. The equity multiple is 1.6, meaning that an investor would see $160 of return for every $100 invested. So we're now going to look at some strategies that the county might operate, just some options to improve the financial feasibility of this project. And I'm going to walk through each one. Okay, first of all, we assume that this project receives historic tax credits by being listed on the National Historic Register. You can do this by working with the State Historic Preservation Office, and this accounts for 23% of the financing on this project. It's really crucial.
Is that state and federal?
I'm sorry?
Is that state and federal
Can you clarify?
tax credits?
The tax credits? Is it state info? So it
State or and federal.
Oh, it would be state and federal, yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So the next barrier that we identified had to do with parking. So for every residential unit, there has to be 2.5 spaces of parking on site. This is a lot of cost that the developer would have to front on this project. Similar rural counties, Chatham, Johnson, and Lee, have a requirement of 1.5 spaces for every residential unit. So we would recommend amending that requirement for a project like this to decrease the cost on the developer. Another option for parking would be that the county would develop the parking on site. This would improve accessibility to the park and the gym, and then lease spaces back to the developer. You can see how this shakes out on that column on the bottom, or row on the bottom. So another option would be leasing, or a master lease of the auditorium. This means from day one, the county would agree to be a tenant of that auditorium space, decreasing the vacancy and improving the terms of the loan that the developer would be able to receive from the bank. From there, the county could determine what they would want to do with that space, whether hold it for its own use or find another private tenant and then lease it and receive money back on that. And then finally, we identified interest-only seller financing as an option for a developer. This would mean they would defer payment on the acquisition cost. They wouldn't have to pay it up front, but it would act as a loan. So they would pay interest on that loan over time. The county would receive that interest until they pay the acquisition cost in full. So with all of those feasibility strategies implemented, we see a higher return of 9.7%. This still doesn't get us up to that 15% that we would hope to see. However, a community-minded investor, someone who cares about Timberlake and its future, might be willing to work with this. The cash equity requirement is lower, and then that equity multiple is also higher. So I'm going to talk now about some final recommendations. Proposed actions that the county would take, just first steps that we would recommend. First of all, identifying a community-minded investor we think would be a necessary step in incentivizing it or getting this project off the ground. In the open market, a developer is looking for a higher return on this project, and even with feasibility strategies, it's not reaching that level. Secondly, we recommend listing this site on the National Historic Register in order to receive those tax credits. Thirdly, we recommend amending parking requirements. Again, that was a barrier that we identified. And finally, it would be worth addressing the other vacant buildings on site. There are those 3 auxiliary buildings that have no slated use. They probably decrease the marketability of a slated use for this site. So demolishing them or even determining an alternative use might improve the likelihood that a developer would come in and work with this project. So with that in mind, we thank you so much for your time, and we'll open the floor to questions.
Anybody got any questions?
Did y'all look at anything at all for the other buildings, for the?
So
Did y'all, or did y'all just look at the school building itself?
We looked at the other buildings as well, and what we basically did was we made a financial model with different scenarios. One of the scenarios is, redo the school itself, and one of the other scenarios is, what if we redid the school and the outlying buildings? And we found that actually makes the project look even worse to the eyes of the developer. So what we presented here was the scenario that we ultimately decided on, just do the school.
there's additional costs to demolish and then rebuild new is considerable.
One of those big costs, I believe, was stormwater
Mhm.
regulations.
Yeah.
We've looked at that building for many years since it was closed, and asbestos always seems to be an issue for renovating that, and I'm sure you consider that a little bit in your evaluation of the property, what it might cost an investor
Yeah.
to go about that, to abate the asbestos.
Well, there was a report conducted a site analysis conducted in 2012 of how much it would cost to rehabilitate the school, and the cost was somewhere around $2.5 million. And the reason why this project to us is so challenging is because the construction cost, the cost to rehab everything, is just so high compared to the money that a developer can get out of it.
You pointed out some negatives as far as parking and traffic, and we all understand that, but being in the southern part of the county, it's in an attractive location. And it's between Roxborough and Durham, so it'd be very attractive to people your age, probably. So I can see it from that standpoint. I guess if it were converted into the uses you have described, after you graduate UNC, would you live there?
If I worked in Person County, I think I would.
Or what if you worked in Northern Durham? Same thing, same distance.
Question is, how marketable is it?
Yeah.
And
And two, the property itself, it lends itself to that type environment, I think. You've got the recreational aspect that would be attractive. You have, and some of the newer models now, us older people not necessarily don't garden anymore, but the younger, the millennials, and the newer versions, whatever they are, that sort of thing is sort of attractive. So it could be a community center along those lines. I mean, there's a lot of positives, but you gotta think about.
We see Timberlake Meadows, popping up
Yeah. Okay.
real quick. There's a lot of young families moving to those new subdivisions adjacent to Timberlake. So there's definitely a lot of growth. Personally, I think rents will have to be a little bit lower for me to live there. In our model, we proposed $950 for a one bedroom, which is quite high for
I agree with
a
you.
unit in a rural
I
area.
agree with you.
There's been some talk around the community about Person County developing a food council, and Castle County has one, Orange, Durham, and some others. And a lot of the conversation here in Person County is leaning to added value products from our farmers and different agriculturalists here in the community. And if you go over to Hillsborough, there is a partnership between Alamance, Chatham, Durham, and Orange County. And the facility is in Hillsborough, Orange County, and it's the Piedmont Food Processing Center. And what they have 4 commercial kitchens. They have dry storage space, frozen space, and refrigerated space, and an office space for rent for people who can't afford to go right out and start storefront type businesses or invest in the type of equipment that you would need in a commercial kitchen. And they have several companies, several food trucks that are prepping there, several companies in the Piedmont area that come there and create their products, and they have a place to store it, and then they can deliver, and however they do it, and it's all the time. So there's somebody in there first shift, second shift, and third shift. And there's some interest for that here in Person County. Now, I don't know if that's something we do on our own, but if we've already got a group so close to us and they build themselves as the Piedmont Food Processing Center, and they have a board of directors that have Durham commissioners, Orange commissioners, they had grants from RAFI, from the state, and all the Golden Leaf, and all these other companies, other organizations to fund it. I think it'd be worthwhile for us looking into it, and I think that would be a prime location, being Hillsborough, especially with the use that I'm hearing the Hillsborough plant has, that, you know, maybe their third shift or first shift is booked up, and we've got something 15 miles away, or, you know, whatever it is from Hillsborough to Timberlake. And that's something I was going to bring up and see if the board was interested in, one, developing a county food council that not only will look at something like this, but look at all of our different needs. Chairman and I have discussed some of the needs of our local food banks. But I think given the ag community that we have here in the county and some of the prices that they're getting on their commodities, a lot of farmers are looking at using what they produce and having an added value to it where they can get a higher return. And I think that's something that would bode very well in Person County.
Did you have the opportunity to reach out into the other community stakeholders and talk to them to receive their input on what direction or what vision they may have, since they already have an added stake of major property owners?
So a few years ago, there was a community engagement. I forget what year, but I want to say it was in the late 2012. Yeah.
The
So-
Futures Project.
Mm-hmm. I'm just asking.
So that was not within the scope of our project.
Mhm.
We were not asked or expected to engage for several reasons,
Mhm.
but for time constraints and because it would be exhaustive to the community, given that they had already been through that process. So I know the report exists, and that was something that we looked to. Those uses that were recommended were, to my memory, conflicting among themselves, and also not what we were looking to analyze, and possibly not able to be supported by the space.
I was asking, that features report is nearly 8 years old now, so I was just asking if that was part of your scope. Thank you.
And I remember the community college was quite invested in that at the time as well. I don't know if that's been considered more recently, but.
Yeah, that was the potential site for the early college that we explored with Dr.
Yeah.
Bartlett at the time.
STEM program.
Right.
We were behind it for a STEM
Right,
program,
that's
and then
right.
it
It was
turned into
first
an early
STEM.
college.
That's right.
Which went to the community college. But we had originally looked at that location for a STEM program.
Yes.
All right. Anybody got any
Thank
other
you so
questions,
much.
comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank
Thank
you.
Appreciate
Best of
you.
luck in school.
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right, I need a motion to open the public hearing.
Move to open the public hearing.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, Ms. Oakley, if you would enlighten us, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I would like to take a moment to introduce my newest staff member. She will actually be presenting this case tonight. Some of you have met her at the DOT open house. Kayla DiChristina. She started with us on June the 3rd, a recent graduate of UNC's master's program in city planning. So she has been an asset to our staff in the 3 months that we've had her. She presented this case to the planning board last month, and I'm going to ask her to come up now and make the presentation to you also.
Welcome to Person County.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for that introduction, Lori. So, can I get the PowerPoint? Is that... Okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to start my presentation by stating that all general statutes and Person County planning ordinance requirements have been met for this public hearing. Tonight I'm going to present to you a text amendment, TA 0119. TA 0119 is a request by Martin and Sheila Person, who are here with us tonight. And this request is to add an event center to the Person County Planning Ordinance Appendix C, Table of Uses, and Appendix B, Definitions. A little bit of background: the applicant purchased a portion of the former Roxborough Country Club, and the purchase contained only the former clubhouse. The clubhouse, in its heyday, had many uses, and one of those was an event center. The principal use of the clubhouse was considered a private recreation facility for profit in the table of uses, and the event center functioned as an accessory use to the principal use. As I said previously, this text amendment request proposes to add a use that is not currently listed in the Person County Planning Ordinance Table of Uses. Adding this use will apply to both the property in question, as well as provide an option for the other property owners in the county who are interested in a similar business. So the applicant is proposing to allow an event center as a primary use, and given that the property that they purchased previously functioned as an event center, albeit as an accessory use, allowing the property to function as solely an event center would not disrupt the current fabric of the surrounding neighborhood. So in our research, we found that event venues already exist in Person County, although they're in an unregulated state. Properties that qualify for bona fide farm exemption are able to circumnavigate our planning ordinance and then also building inspection regulations. And there are multiple cases where these buildings are used as event venues, most notably the wedding venue located on the north side of Tunnel Creek. In addition to adding an avenue for the persons and other residents to conduct a business of this nature, adding the proposed changes to the Person County Planning Ordinance will allow staff in both planning and zoning, environmental health, and building inspections, as well as board members, to better regulate event venues and ensure the protection of persons and property. The applicant is proposing to add the definition for event center and allow the use by right in the zoning district rural conservation where their property is located. And to ensure consistency with the table of permitted uses, planning staff recommends adding the proposed use as a by right use in the following districts: B1, which is highway commercial, B2, neighborhood shopping, and GI, general industrial. Planning staff also recommends adding the proposed use via a special use permit in the R residential district because of the restrictive nature of that district. So on the screen is the applicant's proposed recommendations to Appendix B, definitions. They propose to add event venue with the definition: a commercial establishment and associated grounds engaged in the hosting and production of pre-planned events like weddings, corporate parties, or reunions. Typical accessory uses include kitchens or meal preparation spaces, limited overnight accommodations, photography studios, facilities to accommodate live or recorded music, on and off-site parking, and outdoor recreation facilities. And then the applicant's proposal proposed addition to Appendix C, table of permitted uses, is to add an event center as a permitted use in the RC, Rural Conservation Zoning District. These are the additional staff recommendations, which are in yellow. The definition we recommend is the same. We also recommend to allow an event center by right in the Rural Conservation District, also to allow it by right in B1, B2, GI, and then to allow event center via special use permit in the R district. So planning staff recommends the approval of text amendment 0119. This proposed text amendment allows a use that previously existed, although as an accessory use, to be added to the table of permitted uses and clearly defined so that it can function as a primary use on the property and in the county for other interested business owners. Additional text recommended by staff ensures that this text amendment is consistent with the Person County Planning Ordinance and the table of permitted uses. So staff finds that this text amendment request is consistent, with the comprehensive land use plan and future planning goals of Person County, and it is reasonable and in the public interest as it will provide clear regulations for event centers in Person County. When we brought this text amendment to the planning board on August 8th, the planning board voted 4-0 to approve the text amendment, including staff's recommendations.
All right. Is anybody else here to speak to this issue?
No one signed up.
Hmm?
No one signed up.
Okay. All right. Any questions for?
Does this have any effect, let's say, so the property is strictly the clubhouse and the parking lot?
Yes.
So no pool, not the pool set, is the pool section included in it? Oh, okay, just so, and how far does the property go down between the pond and the club?
20 acres, so it includes the pond.
Includes the pond,
Yes.
okay.
And,
What is this?
Could I ask you, it says limited overnight accommodations.
Mhm.
Is that to be?
So we came up with this definition by researching what other similar jurisdictions were doing with event centers, and this was the definition that we found was used over and over again.
So would it have, does it have, or is that a future?
I think that's a future. I
Okay.
don't believe that
That's
the
fine.
persons are planning
That's
to
good, thank
accommodate
you.
that at this time.
Adding this, how does it affect other areas that are holding weddings and such? I mean, what are they called now if we didn't have this already listed? So if I had a farm and I was hosting a wedding out by my pond and I put up tents and all that stuff, what is that called?
They're still a bona fide farm, so they're still exempt from the process. So if somebody were to approach having an event venue in that same manner through the bona fide farm exemption, they would still remain that way.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Motion to close the public hearing?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
What is
Thank you.
the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve TA 0119.
Any questions?
I just want to say thank you to the property owners, and I know that property means a lot to the people in the community, and I wish you the very best of luck.
The one thing I would ask is that we're approving it with staff's recommendation and the reasonableness and consistency statement.
Remove, my motion is to include the recommendations of the staff.
And the reasonableness and consistency statement.
You got that?
Yes.
Okay.
need a better term for that.
Better put it in there now.
I know.
Any discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Ms. Reeves, if you would,
All right, I'd like to present to the board some citizen applications for your consideration to nominate and appoint as deemed appropriate. Tonight I have 3 boards. The first one is Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. We have a seat on that board that's designated for the local school superintendent or his designee. Dr. Rodney Peterson requests that the Board of Commissioners appoint Mr. Ron Anthony to the JCPC to serve out the remainder of the term for Ms. Joan Keister, the current designee. Ms. Keister's term is due to expire December 31st, 2019. So if the board so desires, you may appoint Mr. Anthony to fulfill the unexpired term, or you could appoint him for a new term as well, which would take his term for 2 years to December 31st, 2021. I would ask what's the pleasure of the board for this appointment.
Do a new term.
all right, you got a motion?
That's a motion.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
All right, the second board that we'd like to discuss is the Person Area Transportation System Board. We had a resignation on that board for a citizen at large, so we have an application from Ms. Tammy Kirkland, who is requesting appointment to fulfill the unexpired term to December 31st, 2021.
Move for approval.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And then lastly is what you added to the agenda. There's an application at your seat regarding a Miss Jessica Aguilar, who is requesting appointment to the Adult Care Home Community Advisory Committee. This has been a long time vacancy, so I would ask the board to consider appointment for a initial 1-year term.
Move for approval.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is that all?
That's all. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I don't have anything for chairman's report. Heidi, you got anything?
I do. I have an email from our health director, Janet Clayton, who is trying to set up a work group that consists of members of the county commissioners group and members of the Board of Health. And so she is asking if there's interest from the commissioners if we'd like to have 1 to 2 representatives serving on this work group with the Board of Health. And this is just as a follow-up to some of the items that we've discussed with the Board of Health.
She requesting anyone in particular?
She is not, she's just querying interest at this point to see if there'd be 1 or 2 that would like to serve. So I wanted to pass that along. If you want to think about it and let me know, and then we can strategize on what sort of meetings those might look like and who would be a part of that.
I'd be interested on that.
Okay. I also wanted to let you know that the letter for Woodsdale Volunteer Fire Department that the board directed me to send has been sent out. I sent that out to them on Friday. It gave them our 30-day notice that they were in violation of their contract, and it would also extend the 30 days by 2 additional days to make it consistent with the October 8th date for which they have to file an appeal with the state. So those are aligned, which was Commissioner Jeffers' motion at the meeting, and they are in receipt of those letters now. And I think that's all I had. I'm trying to finalize the cell phones and finish up that transition. If you did not pick yours up, so I have 3 cell phones still for the board. If you did not pick those up and you don't want them, I just need confirmation so we get the right cell phone number on the website for you, and I can turn those back into IT. That's all I had.
Joe Wynn?
We didn't. It was 8 to 6, and I apologize for my absence.
Anybody got anything you want to bring up tonight?
1195 Concord Suffolk Road. Need to send someone out to do a site visit. The neighbors and stuff are complaining it's been vacant for over a year. I bet the yard hasn't been mowed in a year and a half.
Okay.
People have vacated the premises over a year ago, and there's still stuff everywhere, and I don't know if we have any ordinances dealing with it, but we have a new family that bought the farm behind them that retired here from Elizabeth City. And they don't like
Okay.
driving past it going into their
Sure.
property.
Okay. 1195 Concord Suffolk. Okay.
Anybody else?
Where do we stand with the cleanup on the old body shop?
I think that's been completed.
Yeah.
Lori, have you?
So, is it?
It's
Th-
gone.
that- yes, I think that's been wrapped up maybe about 3 months ago. It should be. Have you driven past recently? It's all
Should be some
gone.
grass
Should be
up there.
cleaned up.
All the cars, all the,
I believe
The back
so.
part back there belongs to somebody else now.
I don't know, Lori, if you know. I'm talking about the one that Dale
No,
was
158.
handling on Old Oak.
Oxford Road.
Oxford Road?
Yeah, it's Dale's project. I'll ask. I thought that it was complete, but I have not been out there in a while, so I'll check on
The
that.
city guy behind it had some property behind it that he had some automobiles on, but he was
Yeah.
gonna put a fence up on that.
Right.
I don't know whether he's done that or not, but I think the building's been gone.
I'll check on the status and send something out to the board clarifying where that stands with photos if I can.
All right.
Good, thank you.
Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? We are adjourned.
Record leading.
Yeah.